are always asking me, where do the seals and the trumpets and the bowls take place on a timeline? And where are the raptures on a timeline? So what I've done here is I have provided for you a handout. It's just one page, and basically what I've done is taken the Revelation 12 template. That is that timeline that we see in chapter 12 of Revelation. And I would encourage you to look at this series that I'm doing, where I'm basically going through Revelation chapter by chapter. And I'm starting with Revelation 12 because I believe that's the chapter that God was pointing us to with the Revelation 12 sign. So what we see on this template then are all the events that we find in Revelation chapter 12 in the order in which they actually occur, not necessarily the order in which they appear in Revelation chapter 12. The chapter 12 talks about the woman, the remnant of Israel, two different times. One time referring to her being in the wilderness for a time, times, and half a time. The other time it's for 1,260 days. We also learn about the timing of when she is going to be going into the wilderness, and that's after Satan is cast out of heaven. So we can identify the actual chronology that's found in Revelation 12, but it's not written chronologically. Which brings me to a few of the little rules that I have for interpreting Revelation. All the events in Revelation can be inserted into this basic framework. All the events of Revelation can be inserted here, with the exception of, events associated with the millennium and the recreation and eternity. Those aren't necessarily in Revelation 12. All the other events that we find in the book of Revelation, we can insert them into this framework. The second thing I just want to point out again, Revelation is not chronological. It's not chronological. It's not written chronologically, which doesn't mean that things aren't sequential. So we have 7 seals, 7 trumpets, and 7 bowls. They are sequential. That is, seal number 1 is going to be opened first, and then we'll have seal number 2, and then 3 and 4, and so on. So the sequence is the same, but that doesn't mean that every seal is going to be opened before anything else happens. Okay? We don't really know when the seals are opened just by reading Revelation chapter 6, where we read about the seals. And we don't really know exactly when the trumpets are going to be blown if we just read, Revelation 8 and talks about the trumpets. Chronology and sequence are two different things. And a lot of times people will get those things confused. Just because something is sequential doesn't mean that all those events are going to happen chronologically, just the way you see them in the book. The third thing I want to remind you is that Revelation is written from the Hebraic prophetic perspective. And there is a different kind of order that you have to sort of get a hold of. And in our typical Western Greek way of thinking, which is very linear and rational and logical and chronological, we really have a difficult time with this more indirect method of communication using symbols and imagery. This really frustrates a lot of us Westerners, people who, we're very rational and logical, and we want things to be very precise and in order from beginning to end. That's not how Hebraic prophecy is written. All you have to do is look at the Old Testament, and you'll read through a prophetic passage, and some of that prophecy is going to be about the nation of Israel or Judah at the time of Babylon. Some of it is going to be prophetic of the first coming of Christ, and then right away in the second half of a verse, it'll be prophetic of the second coming of Christ. So none of this is written chronologically. It's written sequentially if we have a number set. Okay, so that's about the main thing you can know about that. So how do we figure out timing in Revelation? Well, we have to look at timing indicators. And we have to look at the specific day counts that were given. And there are other inferences that when we read a certain symbol, we have to ask ourselves, so how does that work in a time frame? So, for example, the symbolism or the imagery of a male child, a child being born. We know that a male child has 7 days, and then on the 8th day it's presented to God after it's circumcised and it's named. So a male child and a 7-day with an 8th day is a time indicator, okay? So when we talk about a male child being born, then the dragon tries to devour the child after it's born, and then the child is caught up to God and to his throne. We can look at a male child, 7 days, and then on the 8th day being presented to God. So that's just a little clue as to what I mean by inferences that are gleaned from other passages of Scripture. For example, in the Old Testament, there are several places where we read about how the first male that opens the womb, whether a person or an animal, that belongs to God, and it's presented on the 8th day. Okay, so that's an inference that as soon as we read about a male child, we should have those numbers in our head, 7 days with an 8th day. So there are other timing indicators in the book of Revelation too, especially in chapters 11, 12, and 13. Those are the main ones, where we see 42 months, 1,260 days, 3.5 days. We also read about 5 months and 10 days, 42 months. All these are timing indicators that are meant to be taken literally. There's another timing indicator that is really meant to be taken literally, and that's the hour of trial that comes on the whole earth. That's the hour, day, month, and year of the destruction of the harlot at the 6th trumpet, second woe. On this handout here, you can see that there is a time frame between the great sign and when the war in Israel or the invasion is going to take place. We don't know how long that's going to be. Already it's been since 2017 to 2021. That's 4 years. If we have to wait till the fall of this year, 2022, then that's basically 5 years. So we know it's at least 5 years between the great sign and when this war or travail or the invasion of Israel is going to take place. And then we have this other time frame that's going to be about 2 weeks. This includes the time length of time for the war, and that war may actually start on the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur. We've had a Yom Kippur war in Israel before, and it wouldn't be surprising to have another one start on that day as well. And we know that there's going to be 7 days that the child is here on earth, and then it's caught up on the 8th day. So there's 8 days there, add another 5 or so, and you get about 2 weeks. And then after that, there is another segment of time that's about 6 months long. And where we get this number is we know that the 5th trumpet is going to be blown during this time period. And the 5th trumpet has to be over before the 6th trumpet can blow. We know the 6th trumpet is going to blow right here where Mystery Babylon is destroyed. So that means that there's about 150 days at least that have to take place. We know there's another 3.5 days that the 2 witnesses lie dead. So I'm figuring about 6 months between rapture number 1 and when Satan is cast out of heaven, which is also when the second rapture is going to take place, that of the 144,000. I went over that in the chapter study on Revelation 14. And then there's 3.5 days until the 6th trumpet, or the destruction of Mystery Babylon. That's the same day, okay, that Satan begins to pursue the woman, which means it's the same day as the abomination of desolation, because Jesus said, when you see the abomination of desolation, you need to flee. And of course, that's when Satan is going to send his army out after the woman. The mountain is going to open. Mount of Olives will open. There'll be an earthquake. The people will flee through the opening, and then that opening will close up. The earth will come to the aid of the woman and swallow the flood. That is that army that pursues the woman. And then the beast, or Satan, is going to persecute believers who are left. The beast will reign for 42 months, the same length of time that the woman is in the wilderness for 1,260 days. Christ's return will be at the end. Also, you can see that the third rapture is going to be sometime between the 6th trumpet and the 7th trumpet. We don't know exactly when. This is the thief in the night rapture. This is those who are alive and remain until the coming of the Lord. They're the ones who are going to be caught up to God on a day that nobody knows when that is. And right after they're caught up, that's when the 6th and 7th seal will take place. The heaven will be opened and they'll see God and the Lamb. And they will try to hide, ask the rocks to fall on them. The sun will go dark, the moon will turn to blood, and so on. And then there'll be silence in heaven for about half an hour, and silence precedes judgment. And that is when we see that the 7 angels with the 7 bowls of God's wrath begin to pour out the wrath of God. The wrath of God does not start until almost to the end of the reign of the beast. Okay, that's when they're saying peace and safety. Okay, the beast and the people who go along with him, who worship him. This is a false millennial reign that the beast is going to have. And they're all going to be saying peace and safety because God is not intervening anymore. The 2 witnesses aren't there anymore. Christ is not intervening. There's no restraint anymore on the beast and what he's wanting to do. And of course, the people are going to cast off restraint too. And that's how they want it. And when nobody's coming in and, basically throwing cold water on their party, they're going to be saying, I think we've made it. I think we're, especially if it gets toward, almost 3.5 years are over, they're going to be, heaving this sigh of relief. Oh boy, peace and safety. Then sudden destruction comes. Okay, and they will not escape. That's when the bowls of wrath hit them, and Armageddon and the second coming of Christ and all of that. Okay, so you can see that seals 1 through 5, and that includes the martyrs, not the martyrs of the beast, but the martyrs of the harlot, who are going to be persecuted, and they are going to appear in heaven. We see them in Revelation chapter 7 is that great multitude that nobody can number. These are people who've been killed by the harlot. So these are people who either weren't faithful, and so they weren't raptured in that first rapture, and they got their act together, started really following the Lord, and also a whole bunch of new Christians. And the fact that nobody can number how many martyrs are before God's throne in Revelation chapter 7 lets us know that there's going to be millions of people who come to the Lord. Now, we know that John can count up to 200 million because that's how many are going to be in that army, 200 million. And this is a number that exceeds 200 million because it's a number that nobody can count. It's a number that's beyond any of these other numbers we see in Revelation. So the harlot is going to be the one who is drunk with the blood of the saints, along with the earth dwellers and the kings of the earth, who are going to do their best to put an end to Christians. Okay, and that will take place, the seals 1 through 5 and trumpets 1 through 5, including the opening of the pit, are all going to happen during a 6-month period of time, approximately. Then when Satan is cast out of heaven, of course, that's when the beast rises from the sea. He comes from the sea of death. Okay, in Revelation, the sea can either be the sea as in the ocean, or it can be a sea as in the sea of death. Like death and Hades are thrown into the lake of fire and the sea is no more. Okay, so Christ, when he comes to resurrect the dead and change the living, he puts 1 foot on the land of the living, 1 foot on the sea of death. So that imagery, basically from Exodus, the horse and rider were thrown into the sea, but the Israelites walked across on dry land. That's the imagery we're looking at here. So Satan will be cast out of heaven. He's going to stand on the sand of the sea and wait for his false son to rise from the sea of death. And that's the beast from the sea. When he resurrects from the dead, people are going to party. They're going to think it's awesome and wonderful. And then he will kill the 2 witnesses. They will lie dead for 3.5 days. And then when they rise from the dead, that's when the beast begins to reign. It's also when the harlot is destroyed. So the beast and the 10 kings hate the harlot. They're given authority for 1 hour to kill the harlot, to put her to death. Mystery Babylon will be destroyed. That's the where we find the seals, trumpets, bowls, and the timing of the 3 different raptures. That of the child that we see caught up to God and to his throne, and there's the 24 elders in the throne room of God. The 144,000 who are kept from the hour of trial, that is, they're kept from the 6th trumpet, and so they'll be in heaven right about the time Satan is cast out. And then that 3rd rapture is the rapture of those who are alive and remain. That is, they're the overcomers. They're the people who don't take the mark of the beast. They don't worship the beast or the image of the beast. We see Christ in Revelation 14, verse 14, coming on a cloud to collect these people. Just like Paul says in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, these people will meet Christ in the air, in a cloud. And then in Revelation 15, of course, we see them standing by the sea of glass just in time for the 7 bowls of wrath to be poured out. The main thing I want to point out in this handout I have for you here is that there are groups of time. So there's this question mark. We don't know how long between the great sign and when the war will start. The war is going to start in the fall, okay, the war or invasion of Israel. And then once that happens, it's going to be a time frame of about 2 weeks, give or take. And then there's going to be another 6-month period of time where more events of Revelation can be inserted into that period of time. That also includes that 3.5 days. And then the 6th trumpet, Mystery Babylon, her destruction, there's a whole bunch of chapters that actually have information that goes on that for that one point in time. And then there's that last half, the 1,260 days, the 42 months. And when I covered Revelation chapters 14, 15, and 16, basically we covered almost everything that goes in that last part of the timeline here. Okay, so you'll notice this isn't a 7-year timeline. It's about a 4-year timeline. And there isn't a 7-year tribulation. There's a 3.5-year great tribulation, and then there's the birth pangs that happen right before that. So let me know what you think. I hope you appreciate this. I hope you'll print it out. Even if you don't agree with it, print it out anyway, and you'll have it on hand just in case you need it for reference later on. All right, we'll see you on the next video. Till then, have a blessed day.